everybody, and thank you for joining all over the US, it sounds like. So I really appreciate everybody being here, and thank you, Arquella and Alchemy, for hosting this awesome event. So today we're going to talk about harnessing the power of employee resource groups for DEIB impact. So we're moving from DEIB traditionally to transformationally. So we'll kick off first. Next slide, please, Heather. Heather is our virtual producer. So you can also check in with her if you have any questions about anything. The agenda will be, we'll do a quick welcome. We'll let Arquella, as our CEO and Chief Culture Officer here at Alchemy Consulting, kick us off. And then I'll introduce the guest speakers, and we're going to dive right into the roundtable topics. And then we'll close out the event. We'll have time for questions and want really to have an interactive session. So feel free to drop into the chat your thoughts, your questions that you might have, and we hope to get to them. Next slide, please. Awesome. Roundtable conversations, welcome. Arquella, you want to hop off mute and just welcome everybody again to the roundtable.
Yeah, thank you, Shantae. And again, welcome to everyone. We are so excited to have this roundtable conversation virtually and excited of everyone in the room. We're looking forward to engaging with all of your fabulous, your fabulous selves being here. And so want to really kind of start off, and again, thanking you all for attending. We're excited about the conversation to talk about harnessing the power of employee resource groups for diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging impact. And so we know that when we create inclusive and equitable workplaces, everyone thrives, everyone is productive, everyone, again, has that sense of belonging and feels that that they are a part of the conversation and they are part of the team and at the table. And that's what we want to really highlight during these conversations of how valuable it is to leverage our employee resource groups as resources and catalysts for driving meaningful change within our organization. So again, looking forward to engaging with everyone. This is going to be an interactive session. You all are going to be in breakout groups. You're going to be able to share and think about what are those things that you can take away and apply within your own organizations. And so I love engagement. I want us to think about what's a bright spot for you as you're joining this conversation? What might be a bright spot that's happening with you this week or last week that you want to share in the chat with us? Again, we want to go ahead and get that engagement going as we start to listen to our wonderful speakers that have agreed to share their expertise with us today. So I'm going to hand it back over to Shantae.
Awesome. Thanks, Arquella. Next slide, please. Just to set the stage, before I introduce our wonderful speakers, I just wanted to set the stage and say that employee resource groups, I like to say, are for the people, by the people. They are voluntary employee-led groups who aim to foster a diverse and inclusive workplace aligned with the organizations they serve. So they are in service to the organization and many times the heartbeat really of the culture of the organization. So I like recognize, promote, and leverage. How do we recognize those diverse populations and groups within our organization? How do we promote an inclusive culture? And then how do we leverage that to really drive performance in the business and for our organization to drive things forward? And so that's how we want to think about an ERG journey. One of our speakers, Dr. Joby, is also going to talk about the maturity model as well. And so next slide, and let me introduce the two speakers, and then we'll jump right into our first topic. So first, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Joby Martinez. She is the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Harris Health System here in Houston. Dr. Joby is a strategy consultant who works with private and for-profit and nonprofit clients to strategically advance and manage DEI. Dr. Joby believes in the success to advance DEI is about strategic communication, and strategic communication involves more than what we say and what we put in print. It is also our culture, our traditions, our norms, and what we do or don't do. So looking forward to having Dr. Joby's perspective today. Secondly, we have on the second topic, we'll have Cassandra Washington. Cassandra is the director or the leader, one of the leaders of the D&I organization at Hallmark Cards. and she manages D&I initiatives for Hallmark, serves as a touch point for recruiting and talent development, as well as manages the ERG groups. She works with DEI practitioners and councils across the enterprise, influencing thought leadership and using data to inform priorities. Cassandra strives to create a safe environment for personal reflection and exchange of ideas that fosters deeper understanding. And we are grateful to have both Cassandra and Dr. Joby here to share with us today. And I want to hand it over for our first conversation, as Arquella mentioned. So we can go to the next slide and we'll let Dr. Joby hop off mute and get us kicked off.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Shantae and Arquella, for that wonderful introduction. The team does affectionately call me Dr. Joby, and I always laugh because it makes it sound like I deserve a TV show or something. But thank you all. I'm excited to visit with you all here this afternoon. We will be talking about employee resource groups. So in my position at Harris Health, I am the Chief Diversity Officer at Harris Health System. One of the initial approaches to DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, was focused on attention on employee resource groups. But what I found was that oftentimes our employee resource groups are a little bit misunderstood. As Shantae discussed in the introduction, these are voluntary groups. Although in the DEI space, though, over the last couple of years, there's been quite a bit of encouragement, either for a CDO or for employees, to form their employee resource groups, to advocate, to assist with, and to serve as a sounding board for a lot of DEI ideas. Now, one of the things that doesn't always happen, though, is we often look at our employee resource groups and keep them as employee resource groups. We don't fully utilize that word in the middle, the resource portion. So I'm going to talk about how we can advance our employee resource groups to serve as inclusion resource groups. We want our resource groups to be a foundation for us at our companies and our organizations to not only assist with those aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, but really how can they assist us in achieving our mission of recruiting and retaining some of the best talent in the organization, but also helping us take a look at what are some advocacy, what are some policies, what are some benefits, what are some opportunities that they can also be a voice to, and help us as leadership identify any barriers or opportunities that we need to in our space. We can go on to the next slide. So again, as we continue forward, thinking about how do we utilize employee resource groups to serve as inclusion resource groups, belonging resource groups. You can absolutely change that first letter on that acronym to inclusion or belonging, equity resource groups, any of those acronyms that are in the DEIB space. So one of the first things we started talking about as this group was planning this conversation was, what are our foundations at our companies and our organizations as they relate to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? So we here at Harris Health, one of the first things we identified was, what are our strategic pillars? What are our foundations? What's the framework that we're going to utilize to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion? And you'll see how we're tying these into our resource groups in a little bit. But of course, the primary one is talent. Who we recruit, who we retain, what communities are we recruiting from, who are we training, who are we allowing for internal mobility and promotion and continued professional development in the organization. Because we are a healthcare system and we serve some of the most vulnerable populations in Houston and Harris County, we do look at health equity. Are we being equitable in our approaches to healthcare? Are we being equitable to all of our patients, whatever that spectrum may be in terms of insured, uninsured, in terms of immigrant or US citizenship status, in terms of health, in terms of zip code, in terms of many of those different things. And then we have minority women business enterprise. So many of you may call that supplier diversity, but that is part of our foundation. That's part of health equity work as well. When we look at and employ individuals who, or organizations or companies that have not been given an equal opportunity to participate in supplier diversity, or just the supply chain, organization, then we definitely want to be a part of that. Leadership and governance. Our ERGs often stay and reside as ERGs, and as leadership and governance, we don't not only not fully utilize them, but we often don't recognize them for the work that they promote, for the leadership that they provide, for the guidance that they give us in this DEIB space. And then finally, community engagement. That is another pillar of our strategic plan and our DEI framework at Harris Health. Community engagement just serves many different things. It's where we recruit our talent from. It's where our patients come from. It's where our employees come from. It's where we look for supplier diversity, but it's also who we serve, because Harris Health is about giving back to our community. Next slide. Why our foundations are important, and I know that my great friend and colleague at Hallmark will also talk about these things, is because if you look at the sort of brackets on your right side of your screen, I think they're on your right side, but they're labeled talent, community engagement, and leadership. This is an example of a calendar from our veterans, our vets group, our veterans ERG. We have 7 ERGs at Harris Health System. Something that I employed or deployed, I guess you could say, when I first started was a program called Synergy. So SYN and then ERG. So the Synergy program was meant to bring all of the ERGs together, but also because we are a system of clinics and hospitals, we are 2 major hospitals. We have over 28 specialized clinics across Harris County. Everyone was doing something differently. And not a lot of people knew about our ERG groups, but they were employees that were advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we introduced this program called Synergy. And then we introduced a program more recently in November, December called a ERG Academy. And what that really looked to do was take our ERGs, who, when I first started, some of leadership proclaimed or stated, well, we thought ERGs just did their food and cultural celebrations. Like, no, our ERGs have much more power, much more opportunity, much more wealth. And what I mean by wealth is that institutional knowledge, that leadership wealth, opportunities to advance the mission of diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially for new employees, current employees, and other visitors, patients, or again, individuals from our supplier diversity. Too oftentimes, and that's what Shantae mentioned in the maturity model, too oftentimes we leave employee resource groups as employee resource groups, but don't utilize that resource, the resources that they have for them. So what we did through our ERG Academy was look at an integrated talent strategy model. We wanted to see how they can help us in recruiting. We wanted to see how they can help us in retention. We wanted to see how they could help advocate for us. One of our studies found that not a lot of people in Houston or Harris County know about Harris Health System, know about our clinics, know about our mission. So we want them to be our voice. We want them to be out there. They do a lot of community service, as you can see from this one particular calendar. They're out there doing community service, and we want to make sure that we support them in that. We want them to be proud to say that they are members of the Harris Health System. And again, that assists in our recruitment, that assists in our retention, but it also assists in our goal of getting our voice out there and letting people know who we are as Harris Health, as an employee and as a patient care facility. And being an ERG leader, that is leadership development. And I think that that's one thing oftentimes other leaders in an organization often overlook. And what I mean by other leaders in our organization are our senior leaders, our chief officers, our senior vice presidents, our vice presidents. We often overlook the fact that our ERG leaders and our ERG members are contributing to the leadership of the organization because they are advocating for employees. They're creating spaces for our employees to be engaged, to be involved. Many of our groups, our ERGs, do serve as advocacy groups. So they point out policies, they point out benefits, they point out activities that either we're doing or not doing that should be done. For example, we are preparing to build a new hospital as part of our system. Several of our ERGs have pointed out, again, accessibility of restroom. Employees have pointed out through our ERGs, availability of lactation rooms for our employees. Just different signs or different needs for interpreter services throughout the hospital. So these are groups that also keep an eye or a pulse on the system for us. And again, as we talk about integrated or inclusive resource groups, we want to make sure that as leadership in the DEIB space, we create a foundation and a framework for them to serve as inclusion resource groups, to be integrated into part of a larger system. We can go on to the next slide. Again, that was just an example of how we work with our ERGs. Part of that is calendaring. Part of that is helping them identify where they can be successful. Again, we didn't just do this in a day. This is the ERG Academy started in January. And it has been different individuals, different consultants, different leaders coming in to talk to our ERGs about the opportunities they have. Yes, you can help us recruit new employees. So our vet program, for example, they have identified different conferences or even some of the parades. We have a Veterans Day parade in November where they have different job fairs. So they have identified those opportunities for individuals who are returning to the workforce after their service and helping with mentoring and onboarding at Harris Health or at other systems that are part of our Harris Health family. They've identified how they can do that. And many of them were already doing that, but we weren't recognizing them for that or did not recognize that. And so again, it is not something that happens overnight, but it is something that your leadership and your organization must want to do. And they have to see the benefit of that. Because oftentimes we place a lot of the responsibility on other individuals when we have advocates, which is what our employee resource groups are. We have advocates and allies that believe in the mission of the organization, that believe in the success of the organization, and believe in the success of the employees in the organization. And so we want to make sure that we give them the foundation for that. What you see here is a maturity model. There are different maturity models for employee resource groups. So I always recommend that you use a maturity model that works best for you. I do have an ERG coordinator that oversees all of our employee resource groups. And what I tell the ERGs and what I tell our ERG staff is not all ERGs are going to be at the same place at the same time. Some of our ERGs will need some assistance. Some of our ERGs will need a lot of assistance. But it's also up to the ERG. And here's what's really important. It is up to the ERG if they want to move in these directions, if they want to be a part of talent recruitment and retention, if they want to do community service, if they want to be an advocacy group that looks at policies, benefits, resources for employees, wellness programs is one that we've, currently taken a look at. If they don't want to, that's okay, because what I've also seen organizations do is try to take all ERGs and move them all in the same direction. When some ERGs are just intended to create an opportunity and a space for employees that just need a space to either have colleagues to visit with or share some challenges with or share in celebration. And that may be all that they want to do. And I think that that's fine. And we should allow them that opportunity. But if they do want to mature, if they do want to participate, if they do want to be a part of or integrated in part of the what we call our own integrated talent strategy. Again, our integrated talent strategy looks at everything from recruitment to retirement. If our employee resource groups want to be a part of that, because again, it is all a part of inclusion, how we engage and how we make our employees feel included, then we are happy to do that. So again, this is just a maturity model. Matrix, you're welcome to look others up online. There's several of them that may seem a bit more best suited for your company or organization, but we can go on to the next slide. So again, I want to thank you for your time. I know that was a really brief discussion. I'm happy to take questions, but we are going into a breakout room discussion. As we do that though, I want to finalize my comments with the point that employee resource groups have so much potential. And oftentimes they have a lot of energy, but oftentimes they remain in this space that is one where they aren't always heard, or sometimes where leadership dictates what they will be, when we need to let our employee resource groups tell us what they would like to be, what they would like to assist with, and have the appropriate resources to help them get there. Again, you saw the calendar that we did with the vets. That calendar, again, didn't happen overnight. That was several months of having strategy discussions with how we can help our ERGs become a part of our foundation and help us with our mission. Thank you for joining me this afternoon or this morning, depending on the time zone that you're at. We are going now into breakout room discussion. I could keep talking forever. I always got in trouble from K through 12 for talking too much. And ironically enough, every degree that I have is in communications, but this is really your space and your opportunity. I've been seeing in the chat all of these great comments. So we now are going to grant you the opportunity to share with your colleagues and peers in the room and have a great breakout discussion. Arquilla, I'll turn it over to you and Heather to discuss the breakout instruction maybe instructions, breakout discussion instructions. How about that?
Awesome. Thank you, Joby. And I'm going to turn over to Shantae. But yes, thank you all for sharing into the chat those benefits of having an employer resource group or an inclusive resource group. Thank you, Joby, for that. And really sharing the benefits, even sharing where your company may be on that maturity model, and also sharing, some of the ERGs that you all belong to. So definitely keep them coming into the chat. That's why we're here to, again, learn from each other as well as to share best practices. And so thank you, Joby, for kicking off a great conversation. And so now we're going to have you all go into breakouts and to share amongst yourself. And so I will turn over to Shantae to give further instructions.
Great. So we will go to the next slide, please, Heather. We will go into breakout rooms, as Arquella mentioned. Heather will move us into those breakout rooms. We'll have, with the amount of people, we should be able to do anyway between 8 and 10. So those instructions are, if you can go to the next slide, please. The instructions are that we'll share the questions with you in the for the session. Based on your room, you'll pick a question to discuss, and if it doesn't apply, that's great. That's okay. Just you pick another question as well to talk about, and then select a spokesperson for your group to be able to come back, and we'll just chat about maybe some themes from the conversations as well. We're asking that you stay engaged, you share your voice, and be open to sharing and learning from each other around the topics of ERGs. So Heather or Brooklyn will break us out into groups, and then we'll share those question slides with you.
Thank you, Shantae. So I have the groups prepared. We're assigned for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back for a 5-minute debrief. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the conversation, and we will see you all back here in about 10 minutes. Awesome. And then Heather will just pause the recording while
if we are not able to get to you to hear your debrief and your discussion, we want you to share that in the chat with us. So if you're a spokesperson, we'll share that in the chat. I am going to just randomly call out group numbers. And so I know as you might be sitting on edge of pick me or don't pick me, but we just want a quick synopsis of your question and what you shared in your discussion. And so why don't we go ahead and maybe start with group number 4. Group number 4, if you would call, and Heather, if you can help us identify who those group members might have been.
Definitely. Group number 4, Elaine Valadez, Emma, and James.
Group 4, what was your question or what was your discussion?
Elaine, did you want to speak, or I can speak? Well, we kind of all supported different things from different companies. And so we just focused on kind of our short-term and long-term goals for our personal ERGs. So I am with Hallmark and started a group called PACT about a year ago, which stands for Parents and Caregivers Together. So I think our short-term goal was just to build community, just kind of get that community built, and kind of, find that group. And then, just start with providing support to our members, understanding, what type of support our members need and want, and then moving forward with, the education and the resources. I think one of our big long-term goals is community outreach. I think that's something I really want to focus on in the next year. And then just growing our support groups. Someone's knocking on my door. And then being able to focus on retention, recruitment. How can we aid with that, and product development? Just kind of a little bit about that. Elaine, I don't know if you wanted to speak to yours as well.
Yeah, so sorry, my connection is really bad. I may get cut off again. But similarly, we discussed that our short-term goals were to create that sense of community and belonging. The members that came together and launched Hola last year at Crayola felt very much like they didn't necessarily have a space where they felt like they belong, like they they couldn't bring their authentic selves necessarily or be their authentic selves at work. So we wanted to create that space and that sense of community and belonging. And more long-term is to bring awareness and educate Crayoleans about the diversity that exists within our own Hispanic and Latinx cultures. So that's one of our long-term goals, as well as the personal and professional development of our members and our employees.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Emma, for that. And thank you for emphasizing the need to build community first. So a little bit, I know that I gave some context about the ERGs at Harris Health. They have existed for over 2.5 years now. And one of the things that I've noticed is they've actually been kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, been told what to do in this ERG space and not really given the opportunity for them themselves as groups, as individuals needing opportunities to just come together and figure out who they are and who they want to be. Absolutely. I do often hear from others in leadership to say, we need our ERGs to do this. And I often ask, well, let's give them the space to build that community first. And let's give them the opportunity to tell us what they want to do, rather than it absolutely has to be a two-way street. So thank you for pointing that out. As I said at the beginning of my slideshow, it's inclusion resource groups, and you are providing that space as you look to build your community to find that space of inclusion and belonging. So thank you for that. All right, I do see Amelia has her hand up. Amelia, let me get to the debriefs really quick, and then we'll come back to questions, but I will come back to you. All right, so how about group number 7? Individuals from group number 7, if you're happy to share, if you have someone, a spokesperson, or if you want to volunteer someone to speak for your group. Again, thank you for that.
Hi, that's
Emma.
I was gonna say, that's me, group number 7. So our group was a small but mighty on this breakout session. And we really talked about 2 things. One, it was where we were founded. So why the ERGs were founded in the organization. And then also we talked a little bit about the maturity plan. So I'm Julie, I'm from Hallmark, and I help facilitate or lead our LGBTQ ERG, and we had Crayola represented as well as an individual stakeholder. So when we talked about why things were founded or why the ERGs were founded, it really focused on community. We all focused on being a resource into the business, leadership opportunities. So it was a resounding alignment on those are all the reasons why the ERGs were founded. And all at various stages of maturity and how those are impacting the business. But we talked a little bit too about this idea of the maturity, growth and maturity plan, and calling out that at different stages of development and redevelopment of ERGs is something that we wanted to explore more. So how do we put resources towards the life cycle management of an ERG? Joby, you talked about, right, starting off and having ERGs in their infancy and just starting off, and that plan looks very different than like our Here ERG at Hallmark, which is celebrating its 25th birthday this year, right? That growth plan and maturity plan is very different than maybe a new one. But what we noted is that that's cyclical, right? So as people change and as a business matures, you really go through all the processes over and over again. And so how do we build tools around being able to help those life cycle managements wherever the ERG is? And that's one of the things we all kind of agree that would be good to understand and know and collaborate on. So fellow members, Karen, anyone else that wants to talk on that? Tracy?
All right, well, thank
Awesome.
you, Julie. Thank you. We are again short on time, and I know that I'm looking forward to hearing from our next speaker. Again, if you were not able to share in this opportunity for debrief, please share that in the chat. Amelia, I know you had a question. You're welcome to direct that in the chat as well. But for the sake of time, let me turn over the conversation to Shantae so we can continue with our next wonderful speaker.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those who shared and those who are sharing in the chat. Appreciate that engagement and feedback. And then if there are any other specific things that stood out for you in your sessions that you want to share as best practices, please drop that in the chat as well. And so we want to jump right into the next conversation, which is with the real Cassandra Washington. She's going to talk about integrating DEI into your culture. All right. There we go.
Looks like I shared my link with several folks at Hallmark, so you'll see several Cassandras joining the call. Thank you guys so much. I am enjoying this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Joby, for really showcasing the value of these employee resource groups and how much they contribute to the culture of our organization. And so I wanted to talk and kind of open the conversation up about integrating DEI into your culture. And when I think about integrating DEI into your culture, what it means to me is that everyone plays a role in fostering a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. I often joke with Kristen and I that we're working ourselves out of a job because I don't believe you advance DEI in the organization by like a solo effort, right? That it's DEI is a functional area. DEI is everyone's responsibility, and our ERGs are pivotal and foundational to supporting the culture that we aspire to. Integrating DEI into the culture really means applying a DEI lens to everything that we do, and the ERGs support that. So I saw a lot in the chat window of the ERGs that are there. If you haven't put what ERG you're representing in the chat, please add that there and give me a thumbs up if you see yourself as an ERG helping to create a better culture in your workplace. Give me a thumbs up either in the chat or use the reactions to let me know that you see yourself as helping DEI integrate inclusion into the culture. Are we seeing any thumbs ups? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know, this work is good work. It's necessary work, and it's not the work of just one department. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll share with you what we're doing at Hallmark to integrate D&I into our culture. So at Hallmark, we have aligned our actions around a shared framework, and that's what you're looking at now. Our ERGs, our D&I councils, all across our enterprise support these pillars. And so when you look at pillar 1, elevated intentional learning, our ERGs produce some of the best DEI learning activities and programming. They're helping us build awareness of different cultures. They help us learn more about ourselves. And they're showing us the behaviors that create an inclusive environment. When it comes to recruitment, retention, and development, our ERGs are supporting our talent acquisition teams in career fairs and other recruiting efforts. They support our onboarding efforts. So when folks join, they can find a place to connect and be a part of a community. And they offer professional development to their members. So they're growing their leadership, their communication skills. When you look at products, content, and experiences, when you think about our movies, when you think about our cards, when you think about our crayons, our ERGs are supporting those efforts by providing cultural insights on our product, content, and experiences teams. And they're acting as kind of internal focus groups to help us better relate to and understand our customers and consumers. In the community, our ERGs are hands and feet in our community. They're supporting nonprofits that are really elevating equity and inclusion in our communities. And accountability runs across all of those pillars. We're holding ourselves accountable for results by tracking participation, engagement, membership growth, and the impact that we're having in our organization. You know, next slide. Yeah, so, you know, actions without a focus can just be activity and keep us spinning in circles. So our ERGs all across the enterprise are aiming their activities towards 3 key outcomes. And we're measuring our progress across those. We're looking at, are we fostering a culture of inclusion? So we can see our progress on that by looking at our employee engagement scores and feedback from our employees, by our listening strategies, and by listening to the voices of our ERGs to see if we're making progress on creating the culture of inclusion that we aspire to. We're also looking at representation at every level in the organization, and we're looking at equity and in our hiring processes and our other employment decisions. And then finally, are we building brand awareness, brand favorability of our business and in our community? Are we demonstrating our brand purpose in the communities that we serve? All of our actions should be aimed at these 3 outcomes so that we have the biggest impact. Now, this is a lot of good work and it comes with a lot of benefits for the organization. But what I'd like to hear, if Heather can put up a quick poll, is what are the biggest benefits that come from your active engagement in your ERG? How does it benefit you from being a part? Because I think these ERGs are led with a lot of passion. They're doing some great work, but there should also be a return on investment. What's the benefit for you? And I'll pause while you guys are answering that poll question.
So Heather should get that popped up for us.
I see it on my screen.
Okay.
Does everybody else hit? Heather, can you track the polling?
Right now, 58% has participated, 62%.
You
Awesome.
want to share the results with us?
Sure.
Awesome.
Awesome. So yeah, I think it's an awesome opportunity to not only support the business and creating the diverse, equitable, inclusive culture that we want to create, but being active in an ERG is a great opportunity for networking, building connections. At Hallmark, we have 3 businesses, you know, or actually 4. Hallmark Channel, if you guys tune in to our Hallmark movies, Crayola, the card business, if you are buying cards for Mother's Day, Father's Day is coming up. And we also have Crown Center that Aquila mentioned earlier. It's a shopping center, you know, they do a lot of community efforts, but we get to network if you're an active member of the ERG all across the enterprise, build friendships. It does create a stronger sense of belonging, absolutely. And you gain more meaning and purpose in your work. I mean, we spend a lot of time at work. ERGs are doing meaningful, difference-making work, and you get to be a part of that. And it's an opportunity for your voice to be heard, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for participating in that poll. We'll go to the next slide. So at Hallmark, we're building a really strong DEI ecosystem. So a lot of the folks that are leading our ERGs are on the call today. You'll see them in the chat. You get to interact with them in the breakout rooms. We have 9 employee resource groups currently at Hallmark. And you heard from Julie at here, they're celebrating their 25 years at Hallmark. So they've been around for a long time. They're doing work along those pillars to really help us move the needle and create impact in our culture and in our community and in our business. But not, in addition to our employee resource groups, we also have D&I councils. So in our supply chain division, our IT division, our legal and finance division, customer development division, we have D&I councils that amplify the work of our ERGs, but also bring our D&I strategy and initiatives to their divisions. So they're doing great work. And the businesses that I mentioned to you, Crayola, Crown Center, Hallmark Media, they all have employee resource groups and councils that are doing great work all across the enterprise. When I think of ERGs, I think like Dr. Joby said, they're inclusion resource groups, but I read recently that the E in employee resource groups stands for everyone. So when you look at this ecosystem, this is a platform that everyone can be a part of and participate in and help us create the inclusive communities and inclusive culture that we aspire to, where people have a sense of belonging and where everyone can thrive in our culture. So we not only have folks that are connecting over common interests like Earth and sustainability, or connecting around identities like LGBTQ, Asian inclusion, African American, but our allies are a part of these employee resource groups. So I would love to hear from one or two people. Do you have allies as part of your employee resource groups? If you do, what's the impact of that? And if you don't, why not? So I'd love to hear if you could raise your hand and tell me if you're using and including allies as part of your employee resource groups. And I don't know if I can see raised hands, so Heather, you'll have to help me if someone raises their hand to unmute.
Gail Gwynn has her hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually just joined an organization 4 weeks ago, so I'll speak to the one prior. But we did have allies as part of our ERG group in my prior organization. And I will tell you the benefit of that was bringing others along with us on the journey to understand the experiences where there were opportunities and where there was really positive things happening in the organization. So it really created transparency around just the experience in and of itself. I wanted to speak though, because I will say when I was departing the organization, and that's not why I left, but over 60%, and I'll speak to the Black employee resource group specifically, was actually non-Black. So where we talked about in the beginning about creating community in a safe space, it almost became like a fishbowl where employees weren't as excited to share, and it wasn't quite as easy to create community, because then you joined another Zoom call where it started to look very different and diverse. So I'm not saying good or bad, but just raising that for awareness as we bring allies and advocates along the journey.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think having allies as part of the group, and Gail, you spoke to that, is it's an opportunity for them to learn about a different culture that they may not identify with, or learn about an interest like sustainability. I also think there's spaces where employee resource groups, and I hate to say this word when we're talking about inclusion, but where it's exclusive, right? Where we bring together. So for example, recently there was a shooting in Buffalo in a grocery store that involved the Black community. That might be a time where we bring the African American or Black groups together for support and to hear from each other and to share and process our feelings, where we might not include allies in that conversation. And I think that's okay. But I do think allies, and I think Gail's right, like we need to think about how do we include allies where it benefits everyone, and where are those times where we might just pull our groups together for support and be a little more exclusionary with purpose, right? What do you think about that, Kale?
Spot on. And I think you named what is the challenge of in creating inclusion. You've even said employee inclusion resource groups. How do we balance exclusion? And is that, you know, I don't know the answer, but I experienced it real hand. I mean, in my new organization, we're just starting. So it's going to be very much so like community centric, but I think those that are further on the maturation curve, that's a dynamic I think we have to be just intentional about without being harmful or exclusive.
Right.
So it's just
Right.
something to keep, I think, early on in the strategy development.
I'll give you another example of where allies played. Our Arch, which is our Haitian resource group, our Arch group was led by an ally. And that ally is an advocate and has a lot of energy. And so our allies can really show up for us in ways that we need that support. But sometimes we do need those communities where we feel safe to process our emotions and feelings and talk about things that are impacting us. The next slide, and I don't know if there's another hand raised because I can't see that.
And no other hands were raised.
Thanks so much, Gail, for having the dialogue with me. If you look at the next slide, I think it's time for our breakout rooms. So you'll see 5 questions here, just like on the previous slide. I would encourage your breakout to pick one question from the first 4, and then everyone speak to question number 5.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassandra, for that, for leading that discussion, for everybody that participated. We're going to do the same. So Heather will break us out and we'll have 10 minutes to share in the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together and talk about the themes from the discussion. So again, as Cassandra mentioned, pick one of the questions 1 through 4, but then also everybody consider number 5. So we'll let Heather get us into our breakout rooms. Again, you'll have 10 minutes and we'll come back and discuss.
Thank you, Shantae. I'm going to open them up for 10 minutes.
Look, we learning.
Thank you for the reminders.
She's like, let's go.
Yes.
Y'all know it's too hard for me. Y'all know it's hard for me to be quiet.
I need the push sometimes.
Brooklyn probably like, what is going on here?
Wait a minute.
First of all, is that a channel? Jazz Resume?
This.
I'm gonna look that up. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. I don't know about you, but that felt a little longer than 10 minutes. So hopefully you had enough time to chat about the questions, and we'll ask Cassandra to come back on. We'll have Tom again for a few teams to give us some feedback so we can wrap up with questions at the end.
Yeah, so thanks for coming back. I hope that you are creating inclusive, safe spaces in your breakout rooms and connecting with folks that you didn't know before and learning from each other. I would love to hear from a couple of groups on what you discussed and kind of give us some peek into what your discussions were. So raise your hand if you want to volunteer. Otherwise, I'll just randomly call out a number and we'll do it that way. And are there any hand raises?
No hand raises.
Are you serious? I see my friend Susan. I don't know if Laura Thibodeau is still on the line.
I think Carly has
happy to go.
There's Carly.
I am still on the line.
Yes. Carly?
Okay, so yeah, so our group specifically talked about number 3. And sorry, I was like raising my hand versus like raising my hand on the thing. So thanks for being.
Oh, okay. Great.
So one thing we talked about on number 3 was really making sure that people see the benefits of this work. So, and making sure that that is socialized knowing the benefits all the way from the top throughout the organization, benefits from an individual standpoint. So how can your personal development, individual development, growth, as well as the business, right? With the business, you're making more connections, building relationships. There's also, I know in some of our ERGs, the businesses have tapped the ERGs to gain consumer research or support on topics. And so, there's others beyond that, but really seeing the benefits throughout. On the last one, and or before I go on, Julie, Ben, anyone else like to add to that? I kind of did a quick summary. Okay. And then in terms of the last one, really tapping into awareness, socialization. So we talked about like, how can we do a better job of making people aware of all the different opportunities? And oh, by the way, allies, you don't have to be like, I have to check the box to be in that group, making sure that it's inclusive in terms of the allyship, and, having forums where perhaps people can go around and see what all the groups are that they can be included in. Maybe that's in-person or virtual opportunities, to be able to kind of market these groups, if you will, and make people aware of what they are. And then of course, use that as, this is what the benefit of them are as well. So that's what we chatted about.
I love it. So I was looking at the questions to see what they were, reminding myself. And the last one was, as a result of today's discussion, what actions will you take to embed DEIB in your culture? Carly, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I'm not intending to. I'm really just wondering, what's another word for DEI and B? What are we marketing? What are we, when we showcase these groups virtually and in person, what are we really selling?
Well, I'm going to use one of the words from the acronym. All right.
Well, belonging's good.
That you do belong, that you are a part of, that you have support.
Yeah. And I think when we think about these groups and the nature of them, and also just the conversation that's happening in the news and in politics about DEIB, what do we call it? Belonging groups, community groups, inclusion groups, welcoming people to become a part of a community. I like what you guys are saying. Let's hear from another group. Thanks, Carly.
Looks like Gail had her hand up first.
I'll share from the group I was with Emma, and I think some have gone off camera or might have had to hop, but please chime in if I miss anything. We really focused on, similarly to Carly, around getting buy-in and support in community of employee resource groups, and really being able to share the impact both to the associates and up through senior leadership. And as far as action, our team kind of work together to get to create ownership and accountability, and actually leveraging internal and external resources to really help with the strategy around the work based off of how you're resourced. So we had from Hallmark to smaller organizations on the call who are just resourced differently and might have to leverage different tools and get creative with resources. So it was a really, really great conversation, just seeing the different work that's happening across the spectrum based on the support from the organization.
Yeah, these groups are doing like really great work, and really making a difference. And I want to make sure that they're getting rest and that they're doing things for their resilience. Because I read in the chat window, the tax that you pay as a volunteer in these groups, these groups shouldn't be the only ones doing the DEI work. It's a platform for everyone, right? They're everyone resource groups. So finding ways to get more people involved, especially our leaders. And so one kind of way to get leaders involved is to put them on the panel discussion, to let them host, a group, like invite them into a conversation. I think it's important that our leaders show up in these groups and supporting them.
Looks like we have one more hand up, and then we could wrap up. Lori Thibodeau.
Hi, I was going to say that my group discussed number 2, which was about getting the employees engaged and a part of the ERG. So one of the things that we talked about was just kind of connecting them with, that whole marketing phase of, oh, okay. That whole connecting them with the group and making them know that they can be a part of the different community. And that includes things like just inviting them, letting them know. One of the other things we talked about in the conversation was the fact of allyship and the fact that, some people may not fall into your employee resource groups because they don't check that box. And they don't know where they belong, or they don't feel like they can connect. And so they're struggle with that. I actually had a gentleman who was of Native American heritage who says, well, where do I go? And so I think we have to be intentional about creating a place where others can also be a part of the conversation and get involved, and that they also have a voice, because when we look at our numbers, obviously we have marginalized groups who are still not where they're supposed to be, and when I say they're not where they're supposed to be, the truth is that our numbers don't look like certain groups are getting a chance to be at the table. And if we're going to create tables where people can sit down and talk, we also have to find ways for the people who are in the place of power to be able to also come and talk as well, and create that dialogue. Because if we're not creating that dialogue, we're missing that key connection to help build and move us forward. And I think, as stated earlier, connection is the most important piece, but also creating that strategy to help get to that place where belonging is more than just a place in an ERG, but it's a place within the organization. It's a place at that table. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. So Lori, Lori founded and led a women's resource group at her organization that last year was in the top 25 ERGs for the work that they do. So I just want to applaud Lori for that. And, you said a lot, Lori, and one of the things is the conversation is so important. So thanks, Alchemy, for having this kind of conversation today. We could talk longer about employee resource groups and the value that they bring and the work they do, and how do we incent them, engage them, reward them in this work, and how do we include everyone at the table. I think the folks that have the solutions for the culture that we want to create are the furthest away from the power. So how do we get the folks closest to the solutions? Talking with the folks closest to the power who make the decisions. And I think our ERGs give us a platform for those kind of conversations, where we bring those closest to the power to those closest with the ideas for solutions together, to create belonging, not just in our community groups, but also in our organization. So a lot more conversation around that to be had. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Alchemy so they can close us out.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, and thanks everybody for participating and engaging in that conversation. That was equally an awesome conversation, just like the first one as well. I want to give Arquella some time to close us out. And I guess if there's any final thoughts or questions as well. Go ahead, Arquella.
Yeah, thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. So I'll just ask you all in the chat, please add a word or phrase just reflecting of how you feel about participating. And then we have a survey that we would like for you to take and give some feedback. We want to continue to bring these type of conversations to you and to others. Again, just to talk about those best practices. And my charge or call to action is to you all is that you take away something you've learned today that you can take and apply within your own organizations to to be the difference, make the difference, and looking forward to hearing those updates for sure. So I'm going to turn it back over to Shantae with any closing instructions. Also, we will be posting the recording of today's conversation. So whoever is on the call participating will get a link to the recording so you can be able to go back and refresh and to share out as well. So thank you all again. We appreciate it. And I'll turn it back over to Shantae.
That is a wrap. So thanks everybody for joining today. Please, Heather also posted the link in the chat. You can use the QRC code, but your feedback is valuable so we can continue to bring these conversations back to you. And we hope that you have a great week. We're going to give you just a couple minutes back.
Yes, thank you all again. Great conversation. Love the words, encouraged, inspired, intentional, thought-provoking. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you all. Thanks again.
So much.
Yes, thank you all. We'll hang out if there's any questions. Engaging. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you to the Alchemy team. Thank you, Cassandra and Joby.
Yes.
Great conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks again. So we'll hang out for anyone who wants to hang around and ask any questions. We'll hang out here for a couple more minutes. Thank you, thank you. Awesome, awesome. Great group. Awesome, awesome. So Heather, we can stop the recording now. Awesome.